Sometimes the bad guys do get away, or at least they think they do. But high above them, someone else is watching from a squad car that flies. It's called Air Ops. It's safer than racing through traffic, putting lives at risk. It also may give the offender behind the wheel the false impression he's smarter than law enforcement. He looks around, no one's chasing him. He relaxes, slows down, takes the alley for the final turn in the getaway. But wait a minute. There's a spinning light at the end. Do they have eyes in the sky? The answer is yes. This is the Illinois State Police Podcast. State Police. Air Operations, an invaluable tool, and the subject of this episode from the files of the Illinois State Police. Here's Director Brendan Kelly.
Hello, this is Brendan Kelly, Director of the Illinois State Police. I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Illinois State Police Podcast from the files of the Illinois State Police. Today we're going to be talking about something that's people are aware of, I think, sometimes with the Illinois State Police, but don't have a lot of insight into, and that is our air operations. It is actually really, really important part of the Illinois State Police, a big part of our history, a big part of our present, a big part of our future. Because crime needs to be monitored from the sky, not just down on the street level. And the things that our air operations does for the Illinois State Police and does to protect public safety are really incredible. And today we have with us some of the great people who are part of our Air Operations Bureau, our amazing pilots and leaders who are working with our partners on the ground in patrol and in our Division of Criminal Investigation, with our MAGs and task forces, with all of the Illinois State Police to be able to respond to threats to public safety and to use these amazing air assets to be able to pursue justice in many cases. So with that, we have four of our officers involved in ISP Air Operations. Lieutenant Damian Zimmerman, who leads the ISP Air Operations Bureau. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Trooper Jeff Kay, one of our pilots. Thanks for joining us, Trooper.
Yes, thank you.
Master Sergeant Anthony Raciak, who is on the ground working with Air Ops. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, sir.
And Trooper Nicholas Ispas, who is also on the ground coordinating with Air Ops. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Thank you to all you guys. And I think the fact that we have all of you here, not just our pilots from Air Ops, but the people on the ground who are benefiting from what Air Ops does, that is really an important part of the story to be able to explain how effective these air assets are and what you do on a regular basis. But let's start with Lieutenant Zimmerman, who has flown me around many times around the state from one corner to the other. Why don't you just kind of lay out for us, LT, what is ISP Air Operations? What's the Bureau have? What are our assets? What are the personnel? What are some of the missions that you do?
Yeah, sure. So we provide, safe and efficient aerial platform for any, whether that's a police agency, local, county, state, a federal agency, FBI, DEA, ATF. Any of our partners in law enforcement that need an aerial platform, we're there for them. And it's not just law enforcement, it's also public safety. We do a lot of missing person searches for local EMS units across the state in rural areas where that asset is not typically available.
So tell us about, those air platforms, those assets. Like, what do we got? What is in our arsenal of public safety when it comes to air operations?
So most of the time I get two main questions when they hear that I fly for air operations. And the first question is, do you fly the governor around? And we do not. We're not a transportation agency, so it's actually less than 1% of our overall mission is transportation. The second question is, do you fly helicopters? And we don't. For the main reason is like there's a risk benefit analysis, and it is not really worth the risk to have helicopters right now. And the other part of that is cost effectiveness.
Yeah, when I became director almost 7 years ago, I was reviewing that concern about whether or not we needed helicopters as part of our air operations. And the cost to buy one, first of all, is pretty prohibitive. And then the cost to keep it in the air
Sure.
and keep it maintained and keep it operational is also pretty prohibitive. We have at one time had a helicopter and as part of ISP's air assets, and there was a crash and we lost one of our officers died in the line of duty, and it was a terrible incident. But it just underscores the risk benefit of flying helicopters. They can be great in some situations, certain urban environments. They have their benefits. But for what we're doing for an entire state, which is, the top of our state is at the same latitude as Long Island, New York, and the bottom latitude down in Cairo, Illinois, is at Richmond, Virginia. So that's how long and big and wide the state of Illinois is. And we got to cover a lot of ground, and using helicopters is really not the most efficient and effective thing, and sometimes not the most safe thing. So it blew my mind to look at the comparison of the costs for a Cessna compared to a helicopter, and the value that we get and the utility we get. So just tell us about how that works.
No, you laid that out better than I could. And we do have a very long state and a high populous state of over 13 million people. We serve with Cessna aircraft, so high wing, single engine, 4-seat aircraft. We have 4 older airplanes that were purchased around 1999 to 2000, and it's a Cessna 182. We've recently purchased 3 new Cessna 206s, and it's still a 4-seat airplane. Those airplanes are equipped with an MX-10. It's an EOIR. It's a day camera and a thermal camera in one.
So the new planes are in theory 6-seat, but in reality only 4, because
as soon as they come from the factory, we take out that rear bench seat, which is only big enough for small children. We take that out to install police equipment.
What's the area that Air Ops covers? Like, how is the Bureau organized across the state?
So we have 3 bases. The northern base is in West Chicago at DuPage. We have a 206 there and a 182. Both of those have camera systems on the aircraft. We have 4 pilots at that base, and we just added a 5th that's in training. We have the central base, which is in Springfield, Illinois. We have a 206 and a 182 there. And we also house our only 182 that does not have a camera on it. And that's what you and I have flown in together if we need to get you to Chicago in a hurry. And it does cut the drive time down in about half. It's not a very luxurious way to travel, I know. It's a very small airplane. You feel all the turbulence. But we can cut the drive time down in half. And then down south, we have Belleville office, and that has a 206 and a 182 as well, both with cameras on them.
I'll get to it a little bit later, but I have had some personal experience and good experiences, with the Air Ops in some emergent situations where some of our key personnel, including myself, have got to get to from point A to point B, very, very quickly. But anything else you want to tell us about, just the fleet and the equipment that you have?
We have 15 different mission categories, and the top 5 are, surveillances, patrol, pursuit, searches, photo, video, and then also transportation, like I said, which is less than 1% of what we do.
And so you're the leader amongst the pilots here. Tell us about your background, though. So you're some state police or some law enforcement agencies will contract out with a private pilot, and they're not law enforcement. They simply just fly the air asset. but you are full-fledged Illinois State police officer, gone to the academy, and are also a pilot. Tell us about your background.
And I won't bore you with my whole background, but just in a nutshell, I did go to school at St. Louis University, Parks College School of Aeronautics and Engineering to be a pilot. I wanted to be a pilot, but I knew early on that I didn't want to fly for an airline. I didn't want to be a point A to point B, living out of a hotel in a suitcase. And I wanted to serve the public, but I also wanted to be home every day. I wanted to be a husband and a father first, and the state police kind of tied all of those goals into one. So I kind of put all my eggs in that basket. I was a commercial pilot, rated, and had 2 flight instructor ratings. Joined the state police in 2005 and went through the academy. Paid my dues, worked about 8 years of patrol, primarily on midnights, then came over to Air Operations in 2013. And I've been flying since 2013.
So while you are a pilot, you also have a sense of what your fellow officers, what the troopers on the ground may be doing, what the special agents may be doing in operation. You're not just, again, just operating the plane. You have a sense of how the air asset fits into the overall law enforcement operational picture.
Yeah, and all of our pilots in Air Operations were troopers first. We don't hire pilots from outside the agency.
You just gave a hell of a recruiting pitch there, too. That was very good.
Oh, thank you.
So that was nice.
It's honest. That's
the husband, father, serve the public, and you get to fly around and be in the wild blue yonder. It's pretty awesome. So all our pilots are Illinois State police officers. They're all sworn officers. They have done at least some time on the ground in patrol, and that's really reflective of how the air assets are integrated into what's really going on the ground. Can you talk about the technology, Trooper K, the technology that has advanced the air operations capabilities over the years? It's a lot of complicated stuff, and Lieutenant threw out a lot of numbers and acronyms. Can you put it in plain terms for the people that are listening? What's the cool stuff you got and that you're doing? Don't give away any state secrets to the bad guys, but it is pretty amazing what you guys are able to do.
I would not do that. So the MX-10 camera is Lieutenant said, it works daytime and nighttime. And in the twilight hours, we kind of tend to switch over. We tend to switch over when it's still light out to the FLIR. We just get little better results when the sun gets down to a certain point on the horizon. And then I was also going to kind of bring us to this point, how we got here. When I started in Air Operations, it would have been 2011, as Lieutenant said. We had planes without cameras at all on it. And so when I started, my first 5 years at Whiteside County base, a base that's now, I'm over at DuPage now, all of our missions were naked eye and just ground reference. And so you'd follow the car and you had to, hyper focus on the car while flying. And then at the time we would have a little mapping computer that or just a paper map that preceded the iPads that we use now that help us, that will geopoint us on there. So that helps us with situational awareness. And we would follow the car and we'd take notes while we called it out.
So you say follow the car. Explain what that means.
Sure. So we would brief with our units that requested us, and they'd say, okay, our target vehicle is it's always a black or white car, something that blends in, that every other car is the same color. And so, if you got a neon green car or a red car, you're like, yes, this is going to be a little easier. But so it's always like a black car, SUV. So the first thing we do is we locate the car, and
And what is this car involved in? So
it could be anything.
What kind of operation are we talking about?
Sure. Those would usually be, I would say, mostly drug deals, maybe. And so we locate the car, and then the first order of business is looking at our paper map and looking down on the ground and identifying intersections and trying to get like a picture for ourselves in our mind so we can start calling it out.
And this is the brief that you're doing on the ground before you do the operation.
So we would brief on the ground to establish what we're looking for, what type of vehicle. And then once we're overhead, then it's build this picture in our mind of the streets, because it's over towns we're not necessarily familiar with. So you get overhead, and the idea would be to get there maybe 15 minutes early, so you can kind of study the streets and know, okay, if they go north, it's going to be this street. If they go south, and kind of just have a little bit of wherewithal.
So you get up in the air and you're checking things out first. You're getting your bearings. You're trying to
Correct.
match what you saw on paper and what you talked about in your brief.
Correct.
With what you really actually see in
Right.
the sky, which always doesn't always match, I would assume.
Correct. Yeah. And then you've got to look for identifiers in the vehicle. So when, not if, but when you kind of start to lose it, or because again, the concentration is really high back then. You look for identifiers so you can come back in, make sure the plane is functioning. You have to keep flying, scan your instruments, make sure your engine's running properly, make sure you're not off altitude, and then come back to the car. And in that split second, you might they may have made a change lanes or something like that. So you look for a sunroof or some type of identifying feature on the vehicle.
So these cars are on the move
Correct.
from where to where? Like what's the basis? How's the situation where a car is moving? Why is it moving?
Sure, it could be en route to the deal location, or from the deal location, and then they a lot of times they want to know where they go after, and so that's what we're doing. That's where we come into play, and we tell them their moves. And as we're doing that, then we take notes. In the old days, we would take notes what turns they made, and left turn here, right turn here. So we're checking the map, taking notes, looking at the car, and flying the plane, and so.
That sounds like a lot to keep track of. Let me ask you, when you first get up there, and you're again not just talking theoretical, what you see on a map and what you've gone through in terms of your brief and what you think you're going to see when you get up there. How do you really orient yourself and figure out what you're looking at? Because a nice, neat, clean street map, or even Google Earth or Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, looks a hell of a lot different once you get up there and you have the reality of the terrain, and there's trees, right, and there's buildings, and there's things that may have changed since the last version of that map that you're looking at. How do you kind of get your bearings when you first get up there?
Sure. And I don't know, I think you'd probably agree that it's just over time it gets easier. You look for identifying like a jog in a street or something like that, and you go, okay, that's or a landmark. Landmark, jog in the street, something that your eye can go to quickly. And that's kind of like your 0 point then. And from there you just build out, you would look at the map and build out from there. And that's why it's so important to keep on top of each move that they made, because if you missed one, it really threw everything out of whack.
And the digital, you have digital maps while you're up there. You're looking at a tablet of some type.
Early on, we did not. Or if we did, it was very rudimentary.
So early on, you didn't have digital maps. Early on, you didn't have cameras.
Correct.
You were just going up there using your blind eye.
Yeah, naked eye surveillance.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's come a long way.
Yeah.
And the camera is incredibly useful.
Well, tell us how it's different now. Like,
Sure.
What is it like today when you're going up there? Let's say you've got a target that you're working on with a drug unit, or maybe one of the SOG or SAVE details is going to do a criminal interdiction, and there's or you're involved in a pursuit even, some hit off at LPR. How's it different now compared to what it was maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Sure. From a technological standpoint with the camera, we can, as soon as the ground units are calling something out, we're turning the plane toward it, and familiarity comes in with that as well. I was a road trooper in Chicago prior to Air Operations, so I'm pretty familiar with it. We're on the Dan Ryan, and so it's easy to whenever they call out a location for a stop or possible stop, we're turn the plane there immediately, and then the camera operator will put it over there. We'll slew the camera to it. If we're unsure, we can punch in even an intersection. We can put an address or an intersection on there, and then we can get detail from a little ways out. And then of course we're flying directly to it. So hopefully we can give them good coverage within 30 seconds or so.
What's the quality of the cameras like? I guess you didn't have cameras before, but how have the cameras evolved over the years?
The detail is quite a bit better. They're more reliable. Sometimes the older ones would they'd freeze and you have to restart them, just kind of a reboot type of thing. But the new stuff, we don't have issues like that so much.
Yeah, and we're not reading the time off of somebody's wristwatch or reading a license plate from 5,000 feet. but you can at least tell make, model, color of a vehicle now, where before you could just tell that it was a vehicle. I mean, it was pretty basic. And you don't realize how bad the old cameras were until you go back to them from the newer camera. We were lucky to be able to tell make and model of a vehicle back in the day when we first got cameras. And the cameras are still very functional and very useful, but they're 15 plus years old. I mean, you think about like electrical stuff in your house, nothing lasts 15 years. I mean, you have a TV.
How about with the new planes and the cameras that they have? What's the quality like?
The new planes that we have, it's a 10-inch gyroscopically stabilized gimbal on the side of the camera. That's why they call it an MX-10. It's a 10-inch camera. So that gimbal is looking, it's steerable from the operator, 360 degrees, and elevation control as well. The zoom is, Jeff, do you know?
So the plane
20x?
could be headed one direction, but the cameras still look another direction.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. As long as we don't have like one of the wheels of a landing gear or the strut in the way or the part of the fuselage, we can see almost 360 degrees. Yeah.
Nice. And is it color? Is it black and white?
Yeah, it's
I know it because I've seen it. It's
sure.
pretty cool. But
the day camera, low light camera, and then the thermal camera, which doesn't need any kind of visible light spectrum. It's not like night vision; it detects body heat. So we can use that, like Jeff was saying, not just at night, but sometimes in the day, in the daytime as well, to determine somebody's body heat, and we use it all the time for missing person searches and manhunts.
Give us some more examples of how air operations is being utilized. You gave us a long list of those, but what are you doing maybe the bulk of the time?
Yeah, the mission has changed. We started the brief history of air operations in 1959. Trooper Norm Halliday started the unit with his personally owned aircraft. If people believe that or not, they exhausted all the ground efforts for a teenage girl that was missing. And he offered to go up in his personally owned airplane and search for her, and he did, and they were successful. So that got a lot of positive attention, and we were allowed to buy 3 high-wing Cessnas in 1959, becoming the 3rd state agency in the country to have air operations. We've been operating ever since, and even though our mission has changed, at one point, we did a lot of airspeed checks, and people will see those signs on the side of the road that said speed monitored by aircraft. We still do. We just don't do it as much.
At least we'll tell everyone that we do. They're up there monitoring your speed, everyone.
Compliance, any way you can. The way that works is there's airspeed zones, and it's 660 feet. You're starting a stopwatch when the vehicle enters the zone, and then you stop the stopwatch when it exits the zone, and you compare that speed to a printed off timesheet, and it gives us an average speed through the zone. It always benefits the violator, so it's always slower than they were actually going. And the only reason we don't do a lot of that anymore is it's more cost effective to have a trooper on the ground making those traffic stops rather than have an aircraft, an observer, and all the units on the ground. So we do those around holiday emphasis patrols, and whenever a user agency requests it, if they're noticing an uptake in speeders in a certain area, we can go out and do that.
And that's how it initially started, and you're still doing some of that, but
So
it's obviously evolved.
Yeah, and a lot of that, when we did all airspeed, it was because we were funded by different sources. And if it was, we had a grant to do that. So we were required to do 5 hours of airspeed every day. Now our primary mission is 30% surveillance, and then 22% is patrol and pursuits, working with the SAVE, the Anti-Violence Enforcement.
Tell us about surveillance. Trooper K, give us a kind of a little bit of that and describing, looking for a car, but it's not always a car on the move. It can be a lot of other things. So tell us a little bit more about, either one of you, more about surveillance.
So again, going back to that briefing, they tell us what they're looking for, and so that's how we kind of know what parameters they want or what information they want out of it.
And who is they in this circumstance?
So the MEG units, there are different units throughout the state. They're detectives, and they're usually led by state police, a master sergeant, and then they've got multiple officers from other departments. Those are the guys that we're working with, and so they will give us their objective, and we just try to basically spoon feed that to them as best we can with, from a different perspective. It allows them to track the movement of the vehicle without being detected.
So they can stay back a little bit. They don't have to necessarily keep eyes on the vehicle or the person that they're trying to track. And they can keep a safer distance because you are up in the air keeping an eye on them. And how are you communicating with those units?
So we're communicating via radio, and one of the things that's interesting, we're very much working together. We will let them know if we're in busy airspace up by Chicago, and sometimes with air traffic control, we just can't get into a place where we say, hey, if they're gonna go another mile east of here, they're gonna stop us. So you might tighten up, and so just kind of communicating like
So
that.
your
So
target decides to go to O'Hare Airport.
Yeah.
You may not be able to go into that area.
Yeah, it depends. ATC is great with us, and we're very appreciative of them. They're very good with our mission. However, with that said, there are limits, and it's kind of like troubleshooting on the fly.
And ATC is air traffic control.
Air traffic control, correct? Sorry.
And you're talking to them everywhere across the state as you're moving around.
Not everywhere across the state, but in the high high traffic areas like O'Hare and Midway. Not only are we in contact with them, but we need permission to be in their airspace. And just not to go too far off topic, but they're used to the airliners that come in and everything is planned. Nothing. There are very few surprises. And then with us, they say, "What are your intentions?" We're like, "We don't know. we don't know where he's going to go." And so it's usually just kind of like ask for this, they deny it. Well, how about if we climb to 8,500 feet or something? They'll just give us an altitude. We'll try our best to work our way in. Sometimes it's a hard no. Sometimes they'll work with us. They usually just work with us, and we just figure something out on the fly how we're gonna.
So officers, your trooper on the ground, your road trooper that's out there, they have to somewhat think, two-dimensionally in their travels and be situationally aware about who's going in front of them, who's behind them, how fast they're going. You have to think up there in three dimensions because it's not just a bunch of empty airspace
Right.
with the Illinois State Police Cessna up there. There's airliners, there's military craft, there's personal craft, there's rich guys flying around. It's a busy thing up there.
Crowded skies, correct? Yeah, and so we know because we also brief with air traffic control prior to every flight where we're going to be in their airspace, and so we brief with them. And we know the flows of O'Hare's traffic, and we know the ramifications ahead of time. And so if they're following a car northbound on the Ryan, we try to impress upon them like, hey, make the stop soon because it's going to get a lot harder. Like every mile we go north of here is going to get the difficulty for us to stay on. It gets harder and harder. Again, with that said, ATC works with us, but they'll just have to weave us between, if it's an eastern flow into O'Hare, they're on a downwind, and I maybe I'm just getting too into the weeds, but you've got planes unstacked, like the departures coming out of Midway and the arrivals coming into O'Hare are stacked in such a way that we get to get between them. So they have to climb us between them before we get there, and then stay in the middle between them there. And so it's just kind of so we're getting
And as
really
long as you
busy.
can find your little nook and cranny in the airspace, you can keep an eye on the target that you're looking at.
And without this new technology, we wouldn't be able to do it because the pilot is kind of task saturated for sure.
You're very busy at that point. Yeah. The observer is, and so going back to the technology, that's what it allows us to do. It allows the pilot to fly and the observer to work with the ground. And
so there's always two of you up there. It's not one pilot in a Cessna. There's at least two of you that are going to be in.
That is correct.
Okay. So you mentioned, the surveillance, but also a big chunk of what you're doing now is pursuits, interdiction, that kind of stuff. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and it may be better for these guys to talk about this. So this is the two gentlemen over here on the right are from SOG and SAVE, and we work with them in North and South high density areas like Chicago and like East St. Louis to be able to follow pursuits safely and effectively from the air. It's a lot safer for us to follow somebody from an airplane rather than.
Master Sergeant Trooper, tell us about, from your perspective, in the units that you're in, that you work in, how are you utilizing air assets? How does it make your life and your job easier?
All right, so Trooper Espas here. Obviously, North SAVE, so statewide anti-violence enforcement. Our main mission is predominantly in Chicagoland area and pretty much north of Illinois.
And you're part of the Division of Patrol.
That is correct. So basically, predominantly we're starting off, we're focusing on mainly criminal activity near the Dan Ryan and the Chicagoland area, right? The biggest thing is obviously it's known in Chicago. Predominantly, there's a lot of air assets throughout the air. There's a lot of consistency of surveillance being conducted. The biggest thing is communication, right? So the air support's up. We're communicating. We're seeing other factors. Let's just say there's a vehicle that committed forcible felony, a serious crime, correct? So during being in the Chicagoland area, there's a highly populated area, at which point our main focus is the public's safety. So we'll try to utilize surveillance as most as we can in communication with them instead of engaging in a full active pursuit. Instead, maybe we'll stay back and allow the plane to give out its coordinates and just communicate of everything that's going on in that general area. That seems to be a big thing in the Chicagoland area.
So look, yeah, you've got people that we're responsible for bringing to justice, for apprehending, holding them accountable for whatever their criminal activity is. You've got information or evidence or things you've observed directly, or you have, some kind of reasonable suspicion or probable cause based on some other information that you have. Maybe a license plate reader hit that says this vehicle was stolen, that this vehicle that is being driven around, and you need to apprehend it somehow. Pursuits, can be risky in a high population area. Hell, they can be risky in the middle of nowhere in an urban area. Sometimes that you got to do what you got to do, but if you can find a way to apprehend that suspect without having to get into a full on, and a little higher risk, higher degree of danger type of pursuit, you can use the air assets to keep an eye on them and then kind of control how you do that. So explain how all that sort of triangle works.
So obviously we're going out and we're trying to go up there and apprehend a lot of criminals and protect the safety of people. But basically, let's just say we're out on routine patrol and we observe some kind of criminal activity going on. We have probable cause to stop a vehicle, right? And then they observe us, at which point they begin to change their behavior of their driving, right? Knowing the safety, will communicate with.
So when you say they change the behavior of their driving, they drive fast and try to get away.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, they're driving fast, going away.
They've seen the trooper and the squad, and maybe the lights and sirens are on, and they decide to make a run.
Absolutely. And, obviously our biggest thing is communication with the air surveillance, at which point we just kind of allow air surveillance to provide all the information for where that vehicle's travels are going, right? It's a very beneficial thing to kind of just allow air surveillance to monitor everything, and as it's seeing a bigger picture of everything as opposed to us being a distance or from behind, right? They could see everything that's up ahead. They see everything with the camera itself. I think it's a fantastic thing that we utilize, and it comes in handy with different things as well. When people park up or people bail from the vehicle, essentially they're able to watch and give directions of flight, providing safety for us as well, correct? So we're out there, they could see things that we're approaching. So the gentleman is holding a firearm, the gentleman has this. They are allowed to explain a lot more than what we can see.
So the pursuits are not just vehicle pursuits. You talk a lot about air ops keeping an eye on a particular target vehicle, but obviously if the person is on foot, that's the person that you're kind of keeping track of and keeping an eye on. They're usually running. They bailed out of the car and then they're running. They're heading somewhere, and you may be on foot chasing them from your squad car to wherever they have gone, down an alleyway, around a corner. There could be a railroad tracks there. There could be a canal there. There could be the air ops sees ahead that this is a dead end. They're gonna be trapped there. They can tell you all that stuff ahead of time as you're going into that situation.
The nice thing too, from like a canine perspective, is you guys provide real-time intelligence for us. So the dogs, they expend energy just like anything else. So if we have to burn a dog down for like 200-300 yards to get to where you can see the violator hunkered down, we can cut that 300-yard track out, start there, set up a perimeter right on that area, and not waste the dog's energy and still have it be a viable asset. And that works out really good if we have foot bails from vehicles or just pedestrian stops.
So how's a vehicle pursuit different compare when you don't have the air assets compared to when you do have the air assets? When you do have that Cessna up in the air and you're talking to your ISP pilot versus when you don't.
The main difference is that one, it's the safety for ourselves. So we're kind of backing away from that vehicle. We're letting air surveillance kind of call it out. So we're protecting ourselves and obviously the public as a whole. I think it's beneficial too to kind of see the routes of where the individuals are traveling, right? So different means of travels, you could kind of determine if they're going down, a dead end alley, okay, or this specific area. This might be a time where they're going to try to exit out the vehicle and flee on foot. So it gives us a real time explanation of thinking consistently in our heads with everything. When we're getting in these pursuits, we kind of sometimes allow air surveillance to provide the directions of travel, right? So the speeds and other necessities that we're trying to be in traffic going in and out of cars, but we we want the plane to be able to provide all that real time information for us.
And they can honestly sort of bring a degree of calm to the situation, as I've observed it. Like you're focused as the trooper that's on the ground trying to apprehend the violator, but you're worried about losing them. You're also worried about some lady pushing a stroller into the crosswalk. You're worried about other drivers who are terrible, and you're worried about the other troopers that are around you because if you're all moving at a quick pace, you're just increasing the chances that something could go wrong. It's just human behavior. But knowing that you have that air asset in the air, like they know where he is, we're moving that direction. We may not see him, but we know we're going the right way. We have our eyes in the sky, and we're moving the right way. What are there's a lot of risk in any types of pursuits. So we have policies, we have training, we have limitations. Even when it's a really dangerous person and they may have committed a really serious crime, there may be circumstances where you got to say, all right, we got to back off. Like this is just too dangerous for everybody. And we'll try to get them some other way, some other time. But when you have that air asset, you can make a deliberate choice to say, all right, we're just going to slow this down a little bit. We know where they are. And, rather than trying to get them here on the Dan Ryan, we're just going to get them in their driveway when they finally park and they're still, and it's a lot safer circumstances to be able to do that. So, what is the success rate of a pursuit without the air assets versus with the air asset? I assume there's a qualitative difference.
With the air asset, I think it goes up tremendously. If you have capable ground units and you have canine units there and you have an air asset, you have basically the trinity of law enforcement to get that bad guy. They're not going to escape with overhead surveillance. You got a dog that can track human odor. You got people setting up a rolling perimeter that are troopers, police officers, what have you. It's more effective to use the plane as opposed to pursuing at a ground level because you're taking away just reaction time, like we talked about the risk. Even down south with us, a lot of times, even if it is a pursuit eligible offense, we'll get the plane on it and just let them land somewhere and then just set up a perimeter on them and take them into custody that way.
Just
It's so much more effective.
Absolutely. It's exactly what we do in the north. And in the long run, it's a better ending because they're contained, right? So they park on their driveway, they're exiting, they go to a specific area, and we know exactly, where they're at. We could set up a perimeter. It's just a lot more beneficial than full on actively pursuing a vehicle.
And typically, too, like your violator on foot is going to gas out way sooner than a high performance vehicle that we're chasing or anything. It doesn't take as long to get them.
So you've all been doing this a while. You've been using these air assets for a while. We're flying around in our air assets. Tell me, just give me your favorite experience you've had, the best operation that you've been involved in, a mission that you've been involved in.
Sure. Generally, it's a lot of fun working with them. They're great. They're fun to watch, and generally, sometimes you're a little jealous. It's fun to be on the ground running after people. But again, that role was years ago. But
Yeah, people think what we do is really exciting, but if it's exciting, we've done something wrong. We do a lot of slow circles over the excitement. And these guys on the other side of the table have the exciting job.
it's actually quite boring from our perspective, except like when it's going, where it's exciting
and it
to
should
watch
be.
them, and we want to help them. But generally speaking, I don't know if I have one particular instance, but the best is when after a long follow or pursuit, they bail. We get all the people that bail from the car, And then the best is when we can say, hey guys, they threw a couple things out of the car, and we lead them back to that, and we pick up a few extra weapons or something like that. That's the peak reward. Whatever the crime is for, it's just being able to get everything and put a nice bow on it for them. That you feel like, all right, you go home feeling like you earned your money that night or something. So
It's another big advancement of the new technology and the cameras. We can see them toss a gun or drugs out of the vehicle,
Right.
Because it's giving off heat.
And what's neat with that too is they can geoplot it too on the map,
We'll drop
so we
on
can
it.
go back to it later.
So they throw it and we pin it. As soon as they throw it, we just pin it on the camera, and then so it's pinned in like space and in time on the camera, so we can go. So there's a red mark, blue mark on. So when we go and review tape, we can forward right to the point where they threw it out, and then it's geolocated and then time located as well on the video.
So while you guys on the ground, the troopers on the ground, maybe running through the dark and, maybe poorly lit areas, maybe there's street lights, maybe there aren't. Maybe there's, bushes, buildings, obstructions, garbage, rusted old cars, whatever. And you're keeping your eye on the person you're trying to pursue. But in the meantime, Air Ops may have seen them toss the gun, toss the drugs, boop, mark it, keep running, get them. We'll come back later for it. That's pretty effective. That's pretty cool. And I assume that
Yeah.
you can coordinate
It's-
that with the canines as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
And we've seen them try a lot of things like hiding in trash cans or going down an alley, hiding under cars, crawling under cars. And, it's something that you might miss from the ground.
So, the other percentage of stuff, what you do, is there part of that is occasionally search and rescue, or
Sure.
you're searching for
Yeah, we
someone
obviously
who may
all
be
want
deceased?
we all want to get the bad guy, like that at the end of the day. But I think for myself, and I can probably speak for Jeff too, there's no greater win than for us to find a missing person and reunite a family member with a loved one before it's too late. Minutes really matter on those searches.
Tell me how that has played out for you before. Any good example of that?
Yeah, we've found children that wander off from home playing, going down to a creek, walking out into a cornfield and getting lost. A lot of rural areas, elderly searches, silver searches, Alzheimer's and dementia sufferers that will wander away from their house. It a lot of times happens in the hottest parts of the summer. And with no air movement in those cornfields, it doesn't take long before things get really bad really quickly. So minutes really matter. We can get overhead, search effectively with one plane and one pilot and operator working the camera, trying to locate that person. And we can it's a force multiplier. We can operate and cover a much bigger footprint than you can from the ground. And that's where the cost effectiveness really comes in. 100 searchers could look for days and not find what we can find in sometimes minutes of searching.
Sometimes the people who they don't survive, or there's even been death by suicide at times, and you're just looking for the remains. You want to find where they went.
And as tragic as that is, and it's hard to see even from the airplane, 5,000 feet above the ground, it's hard to see. But the piece that I take in that is knowing that you're ending that search and ending that, that inner turmoil and emotional, fatigue for that family member. At least puts closure on the search.
Trooper, what about you? What's the best experience you've had using air assets, or most interesting, or thing that sticks out in your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of events that occur up in the Chicagoland area.
Yeah.
But one specific is, biggest thing is we had an incident where a trooper tried to make a traffic stop, at which time he could tell, like, hey, you know what, this vehicle's it's not coming to a stop. And basically, it's a lot of the people within our unit kind of start picking up the different behaviors, like the vehicle's not coming to a complete stop, at which point then they communicate with the air assets in which a traffic stop was conducted, right? And the driver decided to exit and flee on foot. The troopers gave pursuit and got the driver into custody, at which time the passenger then got in the driver's seat and decided to flee the original traffic stop. We had air surveillance up we were able to immediately coordinate as soon as we got him in custody and say, hey, the vehicle just went westbound. And at which point air surveillance is able to monitor everything and communicate and give out the vehicle's travels, at which time the vehicle was able to park up and then abandoned lot in which our unit then conveyed on the new driver and was able to place that individual in a custody in which a firearm was located, right? I think it's just a fantastic thing to note that the communication between air assets and the camera and everything that we have technology wise was a beneficial thing for us. And like we say, and just in law enforcement as a whole, you can't outbeat the radio communication, right? So that's a big thing. Doesn't matter how fast your car is or everything, that radio is always going to be faster. So I feel like that was a notable arrest that stood out for me, and within my time within the SAVE unit.
Sergeant, you're down in
Metro
my
East.
old neck of the woods in the Metro East, across from in Illinois, in southern Illinois, across from St. Louis in that area. But that's, I'm sure there's lots of rural areas in southern Illinois, but it's also a dense, very active part of the state of Illinois in terms of population, urban areas, crime. So I'm sure you have quite a few tales you could tell.
Yeah. One of my favorites is when we actually put the tactical positioning policy into place back around like 2022, because at that point, like ground road troopers, we really didn't know what you guys did. Like you talked about like the airspeed stuff. Like, all right, the plane writes tickets. That's cool. And like they put out this policy, and so we could actually like, we might not be able to pursue, but we can still follow with the intent to apprehend and everything. So long story short, a person comes in and tells us that their car is stolen and they got GPS updates on the vehicle. One of my partners locates the vehicle and is getting ready to stop it. Change of behavior, just like up in Chicago, takes off. So unbeknownst to us, Sergeant Scrobel, he's up with, I think it was Air 6 at the time, but he's like, hey, we're overhead. Give this thing a shot, right? You guys start doing aerial overwatch and letting us know. Vehicle starts just way away from us, like 120 plus, all the way up into rural Madison County. But we're getting real-time intelligence updates. We're doing our tactical positioning, following it. They park, end up at a hotel. The occupants get out on foot and start hiding under structures. And then another one goes towards like a tree line and a pond. Without you guys or air ops, we wouldn't be able to catch them. We wouldn't know the direction. They probably went 30, 40 miles. You guys are with them real time, got in the area, had canines, set up a perimeter, got everybody in custody. Car wasn't wrecked out for the person that called us. We were able to get them their vehicle back. We had 2 violators in custody with some drugs too. No risk, no problems, super easy. And it was after that, like we found out you guys had video up there too. So we're watching, and this is the old one too. But like, so we didn't know that, but we had the video with your old camera systems, which was still amazing to see. But now the new ones are so much better. And we really started like dialing in, working with air ops down in Belleville and finding out what we're capable of doing. And like that transition to like the surveillance that we do, if we think vehicles are going to flee ahead of time, setting up, getting rolling surveillance. I just really tried to dial it in now, and it's been amazing.
Okay, so we were following a car on the highway, and the car crash, and it was most of the time it's not like out of the movies. The portrayal in movies is very, very sensationalized, but this one hit a light pole and there's an explosion. So we're like, whoa. And sometimes we'll be on the radio going, just because you can't believe what's happening in front of you. And so the car crashes, the light pole falls, there's a small explosion, and 3 people get out and run. 2 run toward housing area, and 1 went right into traffic and carjacked another car. And so we said, okay, he just carjacked that car. I don't know if the troopers got on it right away. I think we ended up getting him into custody. Okay. But just right there in front of us, he carjacks the other car, and then the other 2 ran into this housing area and they go out of sight. And so we just we'll review tape to see if we can see him go into a car or into a garbage can. And long story short, we ended up getting them. And then they said, we got all 4 in custody. We said, well, we only saw 3. Well, the driver of the car was still in the car. He had broken legs from the crash. And so he was still, so we managed to get all 3 of them, but that was one of the more intense ones where we watched them carjack another vehicle right there as the situation was going. So that's one of the harder things, is just to stay calm. Because obviously if we're getting excited, it's harder for them to understand us. So it's just try to be monotone or as calm as possible, so that way we can communicate to them as effectively as possible.
We had one where a boyfriend had killed his girlfriend up in northern Illinois, and we got on the car from the ground units. It was what we call an ISPERN, broadcast for this vehicle. And a trooper found the vehicle, attempted a traffic stop. The subject got out, fired an entire magazine of bullets at the trooper and hit the trooper. Then we started a manhunt for that subject afterwards. We saw him and located the subject as he was running across the road, called it out to the ground units, and the subject was on foot. And one of the officers on the ground ended up hitting him with his squad car, and then the subject was taken into custody.
Right. He'd already emptied a magazine at one trooper, so he wasn't going to take his chances, and he just hit him with his car.
Wasn't a pursuit or anything because then like we don't get a lot of pursuits down there, but we try to maintain visual on the fleeing vehicles as much as possible. And as director, we have the Missouri line right there, so the goal a lot of times if you're a violator is to go into Missouri because we can't get you. But our counterparts in Missouri State Police, they have the Storm Unit, which is similar to SAVE, but had Air Ops maintain visual since the fleeing incident into Missouri, followed it into a shopping center, and then we got some Missouri Highway Patrol units over there, and we're able to take the violators into custody and seek charges that way and handle business, which was really nice. So just because water's there and we can't go over, doesn't mean the plane can't fly over for a little bit, which was really successful for us.
Similarly, we have Indiana up in Chicago that they'll cross over and they think that's their get out of jail free pass. Same thing. We'll just follow them unless the supervisor's on the ground. They dictate to us what they want from us. If they tell us leave it, we leave it, and if they want us to follow it, we'll follow it. And it's not a free pass.
No, we can cross state boundaries in the airport.
Yeah. They don't stop if we go to Wisconsin or Indiana or Missouri.
Yeah, I can tell you from my experience in Air Ops, when you guys have had to get me around quickly in certain last minute or emergency situations. Just one trip, it was bad weather, and we were going to fly back south from out of Midway, and it was Bill Scrobel who was flying, and we had to exit out of Midway, and to get out ahead of this little storm cell, we went east over Indiana, but then we had to curve back around and go back over Lake Michigan, and then we hit Wisconsin, and then the front was it was a big storm front, and then we wound up hitting Iowa and Missouri, and then eventually back into Illinois, all in one flight. So a flight that usually takes about hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. I think we were up in there about 6 hours.
Yeah, there's an old saying, time to spare, go by air. And that's one of Bill is an exceptional pilot, but all of our pilots in air operations are highly professional, highly skilled, and we train at that level.
Yeah, and always very cautious. And even though there might be a sense of urgency at times, if the weather is not good or there's any other mechanical issue with the plane, it's always safety first. You don't take any shortcuts. You don't risk anything. And it is amazing when you get up there and flying around the state of Illinois, the fact that there's airports and airfields all over the place. Most lay people know your local airport. Or you may know that, Farmer Bob has a little airstrip out there somewhere. But when you get up there, you can really see that there are just places to land all over the place if you need to. And I know you train to be able to do that if necessary. And I know that one particular location you had to get me, I think was up in Troop 2 somewhere, and we did land on grass. It's just like the meeting's right over here in that hut over there in that shed, and we're going to land on this grass field, and it was fine, and it was easy, and it worked really, really well. I could just say from my own experience, one night in Chicago, being on the ground with a SOG and SAVE and riding shotgun with, I think was then might have been Major Bradley. Now he's Lieutenant Colonel Bradley, and being involved in a pursuit, third or fourth car back, being very sort of cautious, but fully engaged and getting from point A to point B in the streets of South Chicago was very impressive. Very intense, very high speed, you have to be very much on point and paying attention to what you're doing. And then seeing, that pursuit end successfully. And then that same night getting in with Air Ops, and being over the city of Chicago, seeing it from that perspective, was very illuminating. And you can see why the troopers on the ground, when they're hearing what they're hearing from air ops, how it really does drive their decision making in a safer way. Very deliberate, very very forward leaning, aggressive at times, but in a wise way because it's informed by what you can see. And I had again was riding shotgun with air ops and could see on the camera that the vehicle that was pursued was moving at a fairly slow, deliberate pace. The troopers on the ground moving at a very slow, deliberate pace, but keeping an eye on where they needed to go and where the violator was going. Individual got out of their car. The squad cars pulled up. I could just see it on the camera. The suspect took off on foot. And then saw the canines. I could see on the camera the canine came out and was released, and it was like a heat-seeking missile on the camera that just and was able to subdue and bring the suspect down safely and without any issue. As much as it might temporarily be painful to have a dog biting on you to bring you down, it's much safer than shooting someone. It's even safer in some ways than a taser. And you can bring someone safely in front of a judge, and they can face justice for whatever crime they committed, which is what we want at the end of the day. So it's amazing to see all those things operate together. And I will say that Air Ops has had a special place in my heart since I became director, and in part because of the experience I had with Air Ops very early on, not just in terms of the operations that you all are involved in, but when I first became director, it wasn't, it was less than 2 months that we had the death of Trooper Brooke Jones' Story, and I needed to get up to the other end of the state very quickly, and Air Ops, got me there. And then about 48 hours later, we had the death of Trooper Jerry Ellis, and in another part of the state in the Chicago area. And again, it's a big state, and it's my responsibility, and to be able to get to that area and get to it quickly was very, very important to me. And Air Ops got me there, and unfortunately, several other experiences of that as well. And I can recall when, for example, when Trooper Todd Hannikin suddenly died. I was at a meeting in DuQuoin, and I believe they had taken Todd to a hospital it was in the Champaign area, I think, if I'm recalling correctly. And they found a plane very quickly and met me in a airfield in the middle of nowhere near DuQuoin, scooped me up, and then got me to where I needed to be in time to speak to the family of Trooper Todd Hannigan. And again, I've had, unfortunately, too many experiences of that, but it has always been great. And even in emergencies, things have evolved across the state. We've dealt with various crises over the years. Sometimes the director's just got to be someplace that is unexpected, and Air Ops always gets me there. And I know it's not their primary mission; it's a drop in the bucket for what you do, but it's always been important to me. And our people are so professional, and I trust them just like I trust every other officer that we have in the Illinois State Police to do their job and do it professionally. So I thank you all for it. I thank you for the work that you all do on a daily basis. It's having a tremendous impact. We can talk about various stories and technology and investments and things, but the reality is these air assets are helping with the overall effort that we have with SAVE, SOG, with patrol, with criminal investigations. Last year we had, we're now at 80% reduction in terms of shootings on the interstate, and that's directly absolutely connected to using Air Ops. We had 0 interstate homicides for the first time in like 12 years, absolutely connected to Air Ops and deterrence. The drugs that are being seized, the guns that are being seized, now human trafficking cases that are being developed. I know that Air Ops has helped move from point A to point B a victim of human trafficking who needed to get someplace in an emergency. an unusual circumstance. I know that some of our people who have lost loved ones in the line of duty needed to get from point A to point D in an emergency, and air ops got them to where they needed to be. So it's absolutely critical. It's making a tremendous difference. It's helping in East St. Louis as well in our urban policing model that we have there. Lowest number of homicides in 45 years, and that's a project that the state police are involved in with SOG, SAVE, with PSEG, with criminal investigations and air assets, and the other technology is definitely helping with that. So I appreciate it. I appreciate all that you guys do, and fly safe. So thank you.
As we close this file, troopers will be ready to help with your questions. State Police is recorded and edited by Sam Rusink. Original theme music composed by David Huizinga. Produced by Trooper Tammy Wellborn. Remember, good needs to get louder. Until next time, I'm Bill Curtis.